This is TWiT.
25,000 layoffs in January alone this year. Hundreds of thousands of layoffs last year. And yet tech is doing really, really well.
It's a way to readjust wages without actually.
Oh, that's. Although Google's, it costs them a lot of money. They spent billions to fire all those people.
Somebody ran the numbers. Look, remember when all these companies got into trouble with salary fixing a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
And the judge is like, don't do that. And all the companies said, we're very, very sorry. We won't do it. And then the pandemic hit and tech hiring went crazy for a while. What's happening now is when these companies do the layoffs and do their hiring in strategic ways, you've got this very talented workforce. And after a couple of months, they begin to get nervous and they'll take a lower paying job someplace else. So this is a way for companies to gently reset wage expectations without people overtly realizing this is what's going on.
Labor was getting too powerful.
Yes, exactly.
Prices were going up.
100%.
You got to break the back of labor. Google's layoff expenses, according to their quarterly results this week, it spent $2.1 billion in severance and related employee charges in 2023. They're going to spend another $700 million in the first quarter of this year.
How does that compare to how much they're spending in salary, though?
Yeah.
Because it
tells you how much they're saving.
If you're going to do the delta and find out that, they're spending X amount in layoff costs, but they're saving X plus 1 in payroll costs over the next 12 months, that's going to make investors super happy. And it puts the fear into all of the kids in tech where this is baby's first layoff. I
hope it doesn't hurt your feelings if I say this, Wesley, but you've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still think that the RTO, return to office, is akin to the same thing. It's a power struggle to kind of bring back dominance. But there are also some other factors. I was having a conversation earlier today about this, that right now the pandemic funds for retaining workers is being
they spent all that.
So they were getting a little kickback from the government for everyone they didn't fire, and now those are going out the window. And also at the same time, with RTO, they're able to say now you need to come back to the office.
Yeah.
And if someone says no, then now they are violating policy, and now they can let those people go for cause, which means their severance packages aren't needed for that.
Yeah.
And they're still getting some of the same effect. And for the RTO, just buttoning that up, that's tied into taxes, is that a lot of companies that have offices in a lot of different cities, they get tax breaks, and those tax breaks are contingent on saying, we're going to bring this many jobs, or we're going to be supporting all the neighboring businesses around our office because they're going to be eating there and all this stuff. And they can't make that same argument if that worker is remote. So if they say, so they want people in the office buildings so they can still claim and still gather those tax breaks for bringing people into the office. And of course, older workers aren't able to make that move as younger workers are. So it's also getting rid of the older workforce in order to
the ones who have kids and are like, the ones who have kids. I settled my kids into a school district. I'm not going to up and relocate them.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It's soft layoffs without layoffs. That's how you shake out that segment. It's also, and this is very dark and very dreadful, but remember, remote work was really, really good for differently abled workers. It was great for queer workers. It was great for non-white workers. It was great for working mothers because they were able to decouple productivity from presence and show that the productivity numbers were still super high. People still really produced when they were in a 100% remote environment. And the populations I mentioned didn't have to deal with the additional burden of microaggressions or navigating social exclusion at the office. Instead, they were able to prove that they were valuable contributors. But once you go back to, you have to be in the office, what you're doing is you're effectively saying you have to go back to this environment that overtly privileges some classes of worker and overtly disadvantages other classes of worker. But if you don't go back, you just won't have a job.
If more people would listen to the Radical Respect podcast, they could be happier in their work. I'm just saying. And you wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
So a lot of employers, I think we're kind of in that boat too. We brought everybody back in the office. We're concerned that productivity would go down. I think the real fear as a boss is, they're just eating potato chips and watching TV and pretending to work. Now, I have to say, I do know some tech work. I have a friend who's a tech worker who has 3 full-time jobs. She's not working 120 hours a week, but she can satisfy each of those full-time jobs working at home. They don't know how many hours she's putting in. And so she's working 3 jobs, even though she's not giving them each 40 hours. I bet you.
But is she giving them 100% deliverables?
I guess she is, or she wouldn't have the job, right?
Because that's the other thing is, again, when I said you decouple productivity from presence, the idea of a 40-hour work week was revolutionary when it happened because it was a big shift from we own you. Right. Which was the prevalent from there. But
I remember. I think it was in the Gilded Age when they were trying to do the union busting. And it's a TV show, but I think it's probably fairly accurate. Where the manager said, "People don't need a private life. What are you talking about? They don't need to. Yeah. They don't need to go home and spend time with their family. They can work 14-hour days. What's wrong with that?"
But you've seen this move in the workplace towards OKRs and towards all of these things that are measurable and quantifiable. Why should that be tied?
So who cares if it's 40 hours? Yeah.
Exactly. If you can turn it out in 10 hours a week, good for you. Vaya con Dios. Enjoy the beach. And if it takes you 50 hours, well, I think how you're working.
We feel that way. I mean, we're actually looking at how we could have editors work at home more. And as long as they finish the show and it's done well and it's done professionally and competently, we don't care if it took them 10 hours or 2 hours. That shouldn't matter. I mean,
if the task that you're paying somebody for explicitly requires full attention or full presence, that's one thing.
Yeah, if you're Homer Simpson in a nuclear power plant, you got to watch the meters. Okay, fine.
Or if you're a teacher, for example, if you're somebody where your job is to manage a classroom,
or a barista.
You're obviously you're not going to be working as a teacher at 2 separate school districts and zooming into classes. That's not sustainable. And that's not you executing your job to the best of your abilities and to the best of the students. But if you're, say, a software developer and you manage to pick up parallel gigs, as long as you can deliver, why not? Or I would say, even let's say you're a staff writer. Let's say your job is to churn out SEO content. If it only takes you 25 hours a week to do that, why shouldn't you pick up another job where you're doing something similar for somebody else?
One of the things
the problem is that the infrastructure is all built upon us going, driving cars, paying for buildings, eating at the place that we're at, and spending copious amounts of time that are dealing with their jobs. We found out that when people spend time at home, they start to think, they start to demand things, they start to want things, they question things. And so similar to like gladiatorial arenas to keep people busy and occupied and doing things, the entire infrastructure is fed upon us giving this random amount of time, the 40 hours, which was, thanks to unions, was actually much less than what it says, as Lisa was mentioning. But now people are like, you know what, why should I have to give my entire 1/3 of my life, and the other 1/3 is to sleep? So really, you don't have that much time to be able to deal with things. And after COVID, people realized that it was all kind of predicated on a lie to be able to feed the big system, to be able to feed the governments. And that's why, everyone wants us to go back to work, even though we now know from the data that it isn't necessary, it doesn't help. And then people can ask for much more pay. They get much more free time. They have much more money. But then people can do stuff that might, again, rebel rouse the entire system as we know it.
Fortune just reported that employees who return to the office are spending an average of $561 a month on related return to office expenses.
Yeah.
And that's the equivalent of the average grocery bill for a 2-person household for a month. And what Georgia also mentioned there when she talks about, it comes down to where you're spending money and things like that. There's this huge narrative, San Francisco's in a doom spiral, it's dying. And I will cop, if you're walking through South of Market or you're on parts of Market Street or the financial district, you're like, the energy is just super different. But if you go to the Richmond district, the Sunset, Chinatown, North Beach, the Mission, any of the places where there's a mix of residents.
Fantastic.
Those places are packed.
We went to Japantown a couple of days ago for Lisa's birthday. It was wonderful. We had so much fun and it was jammed. Whereas But it's a funny thing because the same kids who jam Japantown now, which is up in the avenues, used to go to the Metreon downtown, and the Metreon is looks like a disaster zone.
You could go bowling through there. Yeah. Well, it's even the same thing in the small East Bay city I live in. You can't get a table at coffee shops during a weekday between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. There are always people just holding down tables. There's people walking their dogs, the people picking up their kids from school. Like the rhythm of daily life for a certain class of worker where presence and productivity are divorced, like that rhythm's completely changed. And I understand, like, it's going to be really hard to read.
You should see what it's like in Roanoke. I mean, it's incredible. It's just a happening. What's the name of that coffee shop, Wesley?
Mill Mountain Coffee. Oh my God, I love them so much.
Washington Post.
Such fun memories.
This week, U.S. economy is booming. So why are tech companies laying off workers? And one of the things they're saying is a lot of these tech workers, after their second, third, fourth layoff, aren't going back to tech. They're retraining. They're getting into a different sector. They're saying, I have had it enough. I don't really blame them.
I know, and like some are just changing industries within tech. Like I know I'm in developer relations where we do a lot of outreach. We go to a lot of conferences, but a lot of people are just leaving and going into software gigs because they said it's more stable. I heard that Dell's like refactoring their marketing. I think that they removed a whole bunch of people from marketing. And there's a lot of that where there's vulnerable jobs within tech that people are shifting to jobs that are either more transferable, like being a developer, or things that are just less risky in general, or maybe they're becoming actors, something a little bit more stable.
Hey, thank you for watching this little snippet from our big show, the News Roundtable This Week in Tech. I'm Leo Laporte. Each week we cover the week's tech news, in-depth analysis, but it's also fun and engaging. You'll find it at twit.tv along with all of our shows. And if you want more, just hit the subscribe button and we'll be sure to bring you a lot more great content. Thanks for listening.